Welcome to the From My Stand podcast with Matt Hinkle. Whether you are an avid hunter, a novice, or someone interested in the sport, Matt has a unique perspective to share. Sit back, relax, and kick your boots up as Matt shares what he's seeing from his stand.
Hi friends, welcome to today's show. Well, it's past mid-December. We are actually in the second half of December now. And today what I want to talk to you about is late season hunting. Now, full disclosure, this year I still have my buck tag here in the state of Ohio. I have not shot my buck yet, so I'm still hunting. Maybe you're like me. Let me just encourage you real quick and just say it is not yet time to panic. Here in the state of Ohio, we've got archery season all the way until the end of January. Then just this coming weekend, there is a late gun season, that little 2-day weekend season they give us here in the state of Ohio. This year is December 21st and 22nd. So I'll be out in that season. I'm actually taking my nephew and we're going to try to get him his first deer. Then in January, first weekend of January, there's a 4-day muzzleloader season. And we talked about muzzleloaders in the last episode. Now, today, we're going to be talking about tactics for late season. Listen, it's not time to panic yet. There's still a lot of hunting left to do. And I'm a big believer that late season is a really good time to get your tag filled. I know we tend to kind of panic a little bit if the rut comes and goes and we don't have our deer yet. But really, it's not time to panic, and the late season affords a lot of good opportunities for a serious and committed deer hunter. One thing I like about the late season is deer can tend to be a little more easy to pattern than during the rut. Things go a little haywire during the rut. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But a deer can get on a somewhat predictable pattern in late season, and you can use that to your advantage. Now, it's not just a magic potion that's going to guarantee success. You still got to be careful. You still got to hunt them right. But deer can be somewhat patternable there in the late season. Also, the woods become less crowded. It does get a little bit harder in the late season. Sometimes your gear has to change a little bit because of the cold and extreme weather. But it can be a great opportunity to get your deer. So if you're like me and you still got a tag and it's mid-December, I would encourage you, don't give up. I'm not going to. I'll be out there with a gun this weekend with my archery equipment, moving some stands around, trying some different things out. And then, of course, that muzzleloader season is a great opportunity. Now, the key to being a complete hunter, and that's what I've always tried to become. I don't think I'm there yet. I think I'm certainly a work in progress. I've been very honest with you since the start of this podcast that I do not consider myself an expert. I do not consider myself a superior hunter to you. I'm just a guy that loves hunting and loves the outdoors. I love to talk about it. That's why I started this podcast. And so we're all kind of growing and learning together. But one of my goals in my lifetime, and I guess I'll find out when I get to the end if I made it or not, but one of my goals is to become as complete a hunter as I possibly can. And so I don't want to just be a good early season hunter or a good rut hunter or even a good late season hunter. I want to become a good deer hunter. And in order to do that, in order to become a complete hunter, you really have to take a little bit of time and commit yourself to some extent in learning what deer are all about, learning about deer behavior. I got a couple of things I'm going to show you in this episode. But first, I just want to recommend a book to you. This is not a hunting book, okay? I have had this book for years. As you can see, it's old, it's worn out. A lot of it is in black and white. You might be able to see that in the camera there. But I've had this book for a long time. I've read it many times. It's called The World of the Whitetail Deer by Leonard Lee Rue III. And I believe Outdoor Life put this book out back in the day, and I got my hands on it. So anyway, it's not really a hunting book, but it is a very good book about deer. And I've learned a lot about deer through reading that book and then comparing it with what I've seen with my own experience and with my own eyes. But in that book, he kind of goes through the 4 seasons of a whitetail deer and kind of what their life is like and what their world is like. And, in the summertime, deer, especially bucks, summertime bucks, they're just chilling, right? They're eating as much protein as they can. They're growing their antlers. They are not really threatened by one another. They're not all that interested in does. And so bucks are not threatened by one another. In fact, a lot of times they exist in what deer biologists call bachelor groups. So the bucks kind of group up and, they're eating a lot of protein. They're chilling. They're conserving energy. They're growing their antlers. And nothing is all that intense in the summertime. That behavior carries into the early part of the deer season in most states. Here in Ohio, if you want to get an early season buck, you're probably not going to rattle antlers together. We'll do an episode in the future on antler rattling and calling deer. But that's not probably going to be very effective the first week or two, because again, the bucks are in their bachelor groups. They're really not fighting for dominancy. They're not running other bucks away to get to the does. That's just not happening yet. And they're primarily focused on food and security. So if you want a buck in the early season, my advice is find their food source. You can hunt the food source in the evening. You can hunt their way into the food source or out of the food source in the mornings. If you get to that food source before daylight in the morning, you run the risk of running those deer out of there. But hunting around food sources is a great strategy early in the season. And then finding that security, because when hunting season opens up, a lot of human activity enters the woods that deer aren't used to, and they haven't seen it much all summer. And all of a sudden, they're looking for their security areas. And so security and food, really good thing to focus on in the early season. Then when the rut kicks in, and what the rut is basically you hear hunters talk about the rut a lot. The rut is the breeding season. Does start coming into heat. Bucks experience an increase in testosterone. Their tarsal glands expand. Everything kind of gets crazy in their biology. And it's all about breeding at that point. Bucks will start to fight one another. That is a very good time of the year during the rut to do antler rattling. It can be an effective method, but bucks are kind of fighting each other off. They're defending their territory and trying to keep other bucks out and trying to breed the does that they want to breed. And that all goes on for a number of weeks, usually mid-fall. Here in Ohio, you really start seeing a lot of rut activity around the last of October and into about the middle of November, all the way up until about Thanksgiving. Then most parts of the country, here in Ohio, this happens. There can be like a little secondary rut when late born does start coming into heat, or if there is a lot of does for every buck, some of those does didn't get bred in the early part of the rut, and so they'll come into heat again late, and those bucks will be out looking for them. So there is a possibility of a secondary rut that comes in a little bit late. But once you get to this point of the year that we're in right now, it kind of, what happens is late season strategies revert back to early season strategies. We're in the second half of December now. And so in my scouting, I'm not going to be necessarily looking for scrapes, necessarily looking for rubs, some of the sign that you look for during the rut. I'm going to be actually looking for that early season sign. What are they feeding on? The bucks are exhausted. They've been chasing does. They've not been concentrating as much on food. Now, it doesn't mean that there's a lot of misinformation, I think, out there and myths about the rut. Some people say, really big bucks get dumb in the rut. I don't think that's true. Big bucks are never dumb, or they wouldn't get big. So, be careful about falling into those myths. They do eat during the rut, but it's not as high of a priority for them. And so once the rutting activity and the breeding activity calms down, those bucks are concentrating back on, they're packing on calories. They're trying to, they're going to go after whatever protein they can find. Now, here in Ohio, a lot of times late season, you're not going to go out and find acorns. If there's acorns on the ground that haven't been eaten yet, a lot of times they're just rotted on the ground there. So again, acorns can be a source of food, but in the late season, I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm looking for food, and then I'm looking for fresh trails. And let me emphasize fresh trails. The rut and the early season, deer have been using a lot of things that a lot of terrain and a lot of areas that they may not use as much in the late season. And so you got to be real careful that you are examining fresh sign. Use cameras. Cameras will be a big way to help you determine, is this old sign that just looks fresh, or is it actually fresh sign? But if you can find fresh trails that you're positive these are, late December trails and not just from a few weeks ago, then you can concentrate on those. I'll tell you guys another thing. I do a lot of thinking about the terrain in the late season. And I'll show you a couple of things that I brought with me to show you today. First of all, and some people call this e-scouting, okay? They'll call this e-scouting, where you are looking on something like Onyx or Google Maps or even actual maps. Now, don't get too excited because, I brought with me a Topo map, and I've got a bunch of different ones of these, but this is a Topo map. It's put out by Purple Lizard Maps. These are pretty inexpensive. They're waterproof. They are good topo maps that give you terrain features of territory that you're going to be hunting. And I'm just saying, this isn't necessarily where I'm hunting this year. So if you're trying to figure out where I'm hunting, you won't get too many clues from this. This map it covers a couple of different counties, and it's a pretty big area. But these are really good maps, and they give you topographical features, and you can get kind of an idea of where deer might be. I look for things like ridges, benches on ridges on the south side of a ridge where they might get the sun. Look for features that might keep them out of the wind, things like that. That's where you're going to find bucks bedding this time of the year. Also, Onyx is a great tool. A lot of people are subscribing to that now, and you can get a lot of really good information. But I'm just going to kind of show you something right from Google Maps, and I'm going to try to show it where you can see it. We're not going to really work with this at all. I'm not going to show you how I would scout this necessarily, but this is just an example of something that's right there on Google Maps. If you go to the terrain feature, it'll show you where the ridges are, where the bottoms are, where the various draws that go up to the top, where points are, low spots, high spots, saddles, all those kind of things are important to know. And so you can do quite a bit of investigative work right from your couch at home, and what I do with these maps is I'll try to figure out, if I were a buck, where would I be late in the season? And a couple of things you're considering. Where's the food? They've been hunted all season. Where's the security? Where can they get out of the wind? And where can they live a relatively peaceful life in the late season where they're just kind of recouping from the rut? Now, you won't answer all those questions with maps and Onyx and Google Maps and all of that. But what I try to do is narrow down areas that just look like this might hold some deer. Then what you got to do is go put some boots on the ground. Guys, I'll tell you this. Don't be afraid to change up your strategy in the late season. I'll just tell you this. I plan on being in the woods this weekend. I plan on moving my primary tree stand. It served me pretty well. Now, I didn't get a buck out of it, but I've gotten bucks from that very tree in years past. It's a good spot early in the season and on into the rut. but I'm going to be moving that stand this weekend, finding a better spot for late season. There are areas where I hunt that I kind of call areas of avoidance, zones of avoidance, areas where I'm not really scouting. I'm not really going into those areas while I'm hunting the peak of the rut because I don't want to disturb them. I don't want the bucks to get onto me. But now that the rut has kind of passed and we're getting into the late season, I will get a little more bold in my scouting because, again, you're kind of getting down to the wire. So don't be afraid to scout in the late season. Now, my advice is to scout carefully. I wouldn't take a huge group of people in there. I would try to get in, see what you need to see, and get out. And then if you find something worth hunting, I would get a stand up, I'd get a blind up, and I'd hunt it right away. A lot of times, what I have found is that usually your success comes in the first couple of sits in a new stand or a new blind. So what your scouting is telling you, I wouldn't mess around too long with it. If an area looks good, I'd get a blind set up, I'd get a stand set up, and I'd get on that stand because things can change really, really fast in this time of the year. But if you're willing to be out there in the extreme temperatures, it's actually kind of nice because a lot of people's enthusiasm about hunting is kind of passed by now. But if you're like me, my excitement about it hasn't passed. And so I enjoy being out in the woods with fewer people. And it can be really, really fun playing that game of chess with those late season bucks. A lot of times I get my deer earlier in the season. I must admit, this is pretty late for me to not have a deer. But, about 5 years ago in 2019, I was hunting the muzzleloader season. I got my buck that year in muzzleloader season. And it is a lot of fun to chase those deer around in the late season. You just get bundled up. You get out there, you find some fresh sign. If there's snow on the ground, it can be really easy to find fresh sign and you go after them. But the thing I would tell you today is don't give up. Don't give up. It's not over yet. There's still time to get that deer. And so I would encourage you to make late season a part of your game plan. It'll help make you more of a complete hunter. A lot of people hunt in November that don't hunt any other time of the year. But if you want to be the complete hunter, learn to hunt that late season. And I think it'll be real rewarding. And I think you'll find that it is a very exciting time of the year to be out in the woods. Well, if you're going to be out there this late season, good luck. I hope you get a big one. I'll be out there with you. Thanks for joining us today. If you find this podcast helpful in some way, my goal is to simply be to provide some enjoyment for you through this podcast and encouragement. And if you find this to be beneficial to you, give me a like, give me a subscribe, give me a follow, depending on what platform you're on. It'll help us grow this. It'll help us grow this platform. I'm having a great time doing this with you. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope it's a benefit to you in some way. Well, we'll see you next time. I'm your host, Matt Hinkle, and that's how I see it from my stand. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to tell your buddies and follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Y'all take care.